Hello everyone, I would like to welcome you to our presentation at the 2021 Applied Energy Conference. We are going to present our latest research, the Food, Energy, Water Nexus in the Keynes sector in a post-growth economy, findings from a CGE model. I am very happy to have the opportunity to present together with my co-author, Holger. My name is Stefanie Schubert. This is where we are going to take you today. Holger will introduce you to the topic and also talk about the model background. Afterwards, I will talk about the model we are using, which is a CGE model, a computable general equilibrium model. And very important for this kind of model that it always needs a calibration, and an important concept when it comes to the calibration of CGE models is the social accounting matrix. I will talk about that afterwards. Then, of course, we will show you our results before we discuss with you the emerging Keynes sector and the local currency. Finally, we will summarize and conclude. And of course, we are looking forward to receiving your questions afterwards.
Hello, also from my side. My name is Holger from the Research Center Jülich in Germany. I will start our presentation with a short historical review. In 1930, John Maynard Keynes discusses in his paper Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren the possibilities of non-economic purposes as new societal goals, because he assumed that in 2020, humankind has reached a technological level that raised the living standard in such a way that most economic problems are solved. However, the change Keynes expected has not taken place until 2021. But the current scientific and political discussions increasingly support and take up Keynes' idea of reduced economic growth, not because humanity has solved all economic problems, as Keynes expected, but because the global community has to cope with the threat of accelerating climate change, the dramatic loss of biodiversity, and its dramatic resource consumption. And degrowth and other new economic models are seen as instruments to solve these issues. In The Economist, Adam Posen and Tim Jackson discuss this central economic question of our times. Are new economic growth models a tragedy or a benediction for society? Tim Jackson from the University of Surrey demands a redefinition of prosperity in which humans can still flourish and yet reduce the material impact on the environment, and calls for networks of neighborhood help as a new prosperity source. Jackson raises ethical concerns about the cowboy economy of illimitable resource consumption, proposing instead the transition to a spaceman economy without unlimited reservoirs of anything, as Kenneth Boulding described it already in the 1960s. Adam Posen from the Peterson Institute of International Economics sees, on the other hand, a growing economy as something natural. Every modern society is built on economic growth, but climate change is a real concern and not a problem of economic growth, but of mispricing and misallocation of resources.
We want to address this very controversial debate, and therefore the objective of our model and our research here is to contribute to the discussion about the characteristics and socio-economic ecological effects of different growth models. So we want to understand it in more detail from an economic perspective. And therefore we will look at the growth debate from two sides. So first, we will look at the perspective of Tim Jackson, and then we will compare this situation to the natural growth perspective of Adam Posen. We use a dynamic multinational computable general equilibrium model. Similar models were used by Ecomod in 2003, for example. And when it comes to the dynamic nature of the model, it is based on the seminal papers by Solo and Swan from the 1950s. As formulated by Arrow and Debreu, it is a general equilibrium model, which means that we do model the behavior of our economic agents explicitly. So we take into account the behavior of households, we model the behavior of firms and the government as well. So this is actually one of the big advantages from using a CGE model. When you do that, you are able to understand economy-wide consequences very well, because you include all the relevant agents and all their behaviors. And second, it does not only account for direct effects, but we can also take into account indirect or feedback effects. So to give you an example, due to COVID-19, many shops were closed, right? Because we wanted to protect our people. So if the shops are closed, it has a direct effect on the firm's behavior because they are not able to sell their products anymore. But there's also an indirect effect which arises from the fact that households are not able to buy the products anymore, and maybe they are also affected in their labor supply. Each country is populated by people that are represented by one representative household per country. And this representative household supplies labor, but also consumes goods and services. Another economic agent covered in our model is the government that levies taxes and pays for subsidies. Also, we have 3 economic sectors per country that are represented by a firm. Now, the firm now produces output by using an intermediate input, but also using labor and capital. Now, the quantity that is produced is then separated into the quantity that will be exported to foreign countries and the quantity that will be used domestically. The technical relationship here we are using is we are using a constant elasticity of transformation function in order to separate exports from the domestically supplied quantities. Now, what is then left for domestic supply is then again merged with imports from other countries with this particular kind of good. Of course, what we are going to import is not, if you look at the good itself, it's not identical with what is produced domestically. So we take this into account by assuming that the goods are substitutes, but not perfect substitutes because they have different origins. This is what is called the Armington assumption. The Armington assumption simply states that domestic and foreign inputs are imperfect substitutes. So this is actually a good way how to handle imports and domestically supplied quantities of the same kind of good. We model in countries because that allows for looking at the variety of different growth rates. So country A, for example, is a zero growth country. So we set the growth rate close to zero, which covers the idea of Nexus in 2018 and also the idea of Tim Jackson 2009. In contrast to that, we have country B, which has a moderate growth rate of 1.2% as proposed by Randers and Maxton in 2016. And also similarly, we have country C with a growth of 1.9%, as Adam Posen called the business as usual approach. And finally, our country D, the fourth country, will contract by 1.3%. So we have a negative growth rate for country D here, because this is based on the idea and the models by Victor and Weizmann in 2012 and 9, and also by Pech in 2018. In each of the countries, we wanted to separate the environmental system from other sectors, and therefore we formulated a food and energy water sector separately from the other sectors that are. So each country, of course, has a traditional industry sector that covers manufacturing. And the production here is very capital intensive. Then each country as well has a public and private services sector that comprises actually all services like trade and banking, insurances provided by private enterprises, state and public institutions. And then on top of that, which is novel here, is our Keynes sector. And the Keynes sector is not characterized by a traditional production process. Instead, it has alternative economic processes like, for example, a sharing economy like the repair cafe, bringing up children. It includes neighborhood help, it includes community gardening, and also care and nursing. Having formulated the mathematical model, we still need a consistent database in order to bring the model to life. And so you can see here on the slide the concept we are using, the social accounting matrix, which is an economy-wide database. Actually, it is used for the calibration of the model, and it's simply a representation of all transactions and transfers within the economy. So it's a kind of extension of the classical input-output framework. So it just covers all flows of our economic agents. And it is a table, which means that you can see that the payments are listed in columns and the receipts are recorded in rows. And therefore the sum of each row must be equal to the sum of the respective column. But we still need a bit more data in order to calibrate the model. And as an example here, we have table 3 that shows the efficiency parameters of our production functions. So actually table 3 covers the economic efficiency. And you can see that the efficiency is lowest for the service sectors, and it is highest for the industry sectors. In between, we have the food, energy, and water nexus sector with the respective efficiency parameters.
The figure shows the first results of our stylized economic growth model. The gross output is the measure of total economic activity in the production of new goods and services in the observed period. The gross output increases in country C and B constantly over the observed period, whereas the output in country A remains more or less the same. And in country D, the gross output declines significantly. Country D has therefore built up a new derived Keynes sector in the observed period to even out the welfare losses. We have also analyzed the development of the following economic indicators: capital, labor, consumption, income, savings, investment, imports, and export. But we will concentrate our further presentation on the emissions, the utility, and the characteristics of the new Keynes sector. The emissions, all harmful environmental effects of country A, increase only about 0.69% over the analyzed period, whereas the emissions of country B and C rise in the same time, about 13.7% and 23.2%. The emissions of country D decline about 1.26% per year. The development of the emissions of the Keynes sector D is not yet foreseeable because the future economic structure of the sector and its specific emissions are currently unclear. The development of these key economic sectors has also a direct impact on the utility level of the households of the four countries. The utility of the households of country A decreases lightly about 0.18% per year, whereas the utility of country B and C increases between 1 and 1.6% per annum. The utility of country D in the degrowth strategy decreases about 1.25% per year, so that the Keynes sector has to provide an increasing utility level for the households of country A. This utility level has to increase annually by more than 24%. The figure shows the possible development of the Keynes sector and its subsectors. The loss of traditional cross-output of country D due to its degrowth strategy should be compensated by new, non-conventional economic activities in all three subsectors. The alternative food, energy, water nexus may contain of community gardens, energy and water cooperatives. The Keynes industry sector might be contained of crafts and repair cafes, and the Keynes service sector organizes the neighborhood help. The cross-output is a traditional measure for all economic activities in the production of new goods and services, which have to be transferred in new economic indicators to measure the economic development in the new non-commercial Keynes sector. An equivalent for the cross-output could be the measure total hours worked in the Keynes sector. The table shows that the Keynes sector is a rapidly growing sector that needs also rising capital supply and investments to increase the equivalent cross-output that summarizes all the activities of the new economic sector. The sharp increase of the activities in the new sector of country D reveals also the need of new institutions to organize and structure the development of the Keynes sector. One option may be the introduction of a local money system for the Keynes sector. Local money is a widespread institutional measure to deal with economic challenges of globalization, economic crisis, and climate change. The idea of local money is based on both the experiences made in the economic crisis of the Great Depression in the 1930s in Austria and the USA. The concept is influenced by the work of Silvio Gesell and of Irving Fisher, who developed his compensated dollar plan to fight deflation during the Great Depression in the USA. Local money might be also an institutional measure to manage the exchange between the economic actors in the derived Keynes sector. The regional and local money enables to transform the non-commercial, non-market economic activities of the Keynes sector in a regional Keynes economic sector, separated from the rest of the economy by an economic instrument, the local currency. Regional currency and local money can promote and encourage the regional and local trade, shielded from the globalized trade. In the following, the Chiemgauer, a German regional currency, will be presented as a model currency for the Keynes sector. The Chiemgauer is organized by the non-governmental institution Chiemgauer Association. The Chiemgau is in the southeast of Germany. The Chiemgau is an area in Upper Bavaria. It refers to the foothills of the Alps, with the Chiemsee Lake at its center. Herrenchiemsee is a complex of royal buildings on Herreninsel, the largest island in the Chiemsee Lake. The question arises whether the Chiemgauer also fulfills the three most important characteristics of a currency: a mean of exchange, an unit of account, and a store of value. The Chiemgauer is a regional medium of exchange and a unit of account, but not a store of value, because the Chiemgauer loses its value completely after 3 years. The Chiemgauer purchasing power cannot be transferred from the present to the medium and long-term future. Based on Silvio Gesell's idea that a currency should be created that loses its value over time to fight deflation during the Great Depression. Now we are coming to the institutional rules for the Chiemgauer. The Keynes sector can be organized according to findings of Elinor Ostrom and Cox. They suggested user boundaries to separate common good sectors from the traditional economy. With the Chiemgauer currency, the Keynes sector has clear user and resource boundaries to the traditional economic system. In the regional currency system of the Chiemgauer, every euro can be exchanged to a Chiemgauer by the consumers at an exchange rate of 1-to-1, but it can only be exchanged back into euros for a fee of 5% from the economic actors. The Chiemgauer has only a validity of 3 years and can only be used by the members of the Chiemgauer Association, and thus it is withdrawn from the global trade relations. The exchange fees are used to support local projects. The interest rate of the Chiemgauer currency is negative. The negative interest rates induce individuals to consume today and not to postpone consumption through savings to the future in order to consume more there. Through the development of the Keynes sector, country D developed a mixed economic system based on 3 economic sectors and the Keynes sector, different interest rates and time preferences. The mixed system consists of a classical monetarized sector based on the euro, covering 87% of the economic activities, and the Keynes sector containing 13% of the original labor demand of the country D based on the Chiemgauer. The figure showed that the globalized economy is based on a global currency, based on division of labor, international trade relationships, and international competition with a positive interest rate and time preference rate. The regional economy based on the Keynes sector is based on a regional currency to organize the exchange of local commodities and services. The new growth models are causing an increasing economic pressure measured by the traditional economic indicators. The model results reveal the high political pressure for the current institution to organize a transformation of the current economic system without utility losses. The question has also to be discussed if the Keynes sector needs new economic indicator to measure its economic activities, working hours, or are the traditional indicators also sufficient to measure the activities of the Keynes sector? The analysis shows that the development of new instruments, measures and institutions, and institutional rules are necessary for the management of the Keynes sector and its economic activities. Repair cafes, neighborhood help, blockchain-based energy prosumers, energy cooperatives, and the founding of water cooperatives. The analysis has shown that the local currency might be also helpful as an exchange medium to manage the economic activities of the Keynes sector institutionally. The utility decline of country D leads to further question. Should the utility sacrifices of the households be compensated by new economic activities of the Keynes sector? Or can individual utility also be generated by consumption renunciation? Thank you very much for your attention, and we are happy to answer your questions.